Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Hello and welcome to Cannabis Common Sense, and it's September of 2020 now. The pandemic just keeps rolling along. We are still recording off of our live show, but hopefully in the next week or two we'll start with some more exciting follow-ups to our hemp news. Of course, hemp news just keeps rolling on. Seems like the news is actually accelerating and the market's accelerating. The sales of retail legal marijuana is growing exponentially. That's a story we'll be covering here in a little bit.
Feel the force.
So our first story tonight is from our federal capital. The United States House of Representatives lawmakers are poised for a September floor vote on legislation, the Marijuana Opportunity, Reinvestment, and Expungement Act, also known as the MORE Act, to remove marijuana from the Federal Controlled Substances Act. The forthcoming vote would mark the first time since the passage of the Controlled Substances Act of 1970, which placed cannabis in the same category as heroin as a Schedule I controlled substance, that congressional chamber has voted to remove marijuana from its prohibitive classification. Passage of the MORE Act is essential in order to truly right the wrongs of federal marijuana criminalization and to once and for all allow the majority of states that have legalized cannabis for either medical or adult use to embrace these policies free from the threat of undue federal prosecution or interference. Earlier this month, Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden chose California Senator Kamala Harris to be his running mate. Senator Harris is the lead sponsor of the MORE Act in the Senate. According to national polling data compiled by the Data for Progress think tank, 62% of likely voters, including majorities of Democrats and Republicans, support passage of the MORE Act. The House version of the Act, H.R. 3884, currently has over 85 co-sponsors. The act would make several other important changes to federal policy. For example, it permits physicians affiliated with the Veterans Administration for the first time to make medical marijuana recommendations to qualifying veterans who reside in legal states. And it incentivizes states to move ahead with expungement policies that will end the stigma and lost opportunities suffered by those with past low-level cannabis convictions. If approved, the MORE Act also allows the Small Business Administration to support entrepreneurs and businesses as they seek to gain a foothold in this emerging industry. A House floor vote will put our federal lawmakers on record. We'll know who stands with the majority of Americans in supporting an end to the failed federal policy of marijuana prohibition, and equally important, we will know who in Congress wishes to continue to threaten the freedom and liberty of millions of Americans who reside in states that have enacted common sense alternatives to cannabis criminalization. Our next story is from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals down in San Francisco. A federal court's ruled that California regulators must comply with the Drug Enforcement Administration, or DEA, subpoena demanding information about marijuana businesses. DEA initially asked for unredacted documents concerning 3 licensed cannabis distributors and people associated with the business last year. But when officials with the California Bureau of Cannabis Control didn't turn them over, the federal agency issued the subpoena in January. The state declined to comply, prompting the feds to take the dispute to court. California officials argue that the DEA failed to adequately explain the relevance of an investigation and provide the document would violate state privacy laws. In response, the agency disclosed in a court filing last month that it the materials were relevant to an ongoing investigation into possible illegal importation and transportation of marijuana oil from Mexico by certain licensees. U.S. Magistrate Judge Linda Lopez sided with the DEA just on Monday, finding that the agency's subpoena met the requirements for an enforceable request. The court finds that the United States has sufficiently established the relevancy of the subpoena to meet the not especially constraining standard, the judge wrote in an order. She went on, quote, "Court does not find that the subpoena is too indefinite or broad. The court finds the records sought in the subpoena are legitimate," end quote. A federal court's ruled that California regulators must comply with the Drug Enforcement Administration's subpoena demanding information about these businesses. In another court finding, it's not clear, though, if the state will appeal this decision. The targeted cannabis businesses and owners have not been named in documents that have been publicly released in this case. This latest development in the legal dispute comes 3 months after the Justice Department whistleblower accused Attorney General William Barr of directing investigations into 10 cannabis firm mergers because of the top prosecutor's alleged personal animus for the industry. In a separate recent legal proceeding, a federal appeals court last month denied a request from the Drug Enforcement Administration to dismiss a lawsuit challenging marijuana's current classification under federal law. Our next story is from Lincoln, Nebraska. Nebraska voters will decide this November on a statewide ballot measure seeking to legalize and regulate medical marijuana access in the state. The initiative amends, quote, the Nebraska Constitution to provide the right to use, possess, access, and safely produce cannabis and cannabis products and materials for serious medical conditions as recommended by a physician or nurse practitioner. Nebraska is one of only 3 United States that remain on par with the federal government regarding continued prohibition of marijuana. Separate medical marijuana legalization initiatives will be voted on in Mississippi and South Dakota this November, and adult use ballot initiatives have qualified for the ballot in New Jersey, Arizona, Montana, and South Dakota. However, after failing to convince Nebraska's Secretary of State to keep the medical marijuana initiative off Nebraska's ballot, a local police official is now going to court to try to prevent voters from getting a chance to decide on the measure. Nebraska's Lancaster County Sheriff Terry Wagner filed the case last Friday, just 1 day after the Secretary of State, Bob Evnen, rejected his arguments that the ballot proposal, quote, causes confusion, creates doubt about what will be authorized after the election, and violates the state's single subject rule for initiatives, end quote. That filing was made by a law firm that refused to disclose the sheriff as its client. Now the top county cop has revealed himself in a new lawsuit filing, and the Nebraska Supreme Court will take up the dispute with arguments expected yesterday. A decision will need to be made in the case by September 11th, pretty tight deadline, which is the deadline to certify items for the November ballot. Nebraskans for medical marijuana submitted nearly 200,000 signatures last month, well beyond the 121,700 required to qualify for Nebraska's ballot. Under the proposal, physicians could recommend cannabis to patients suffering from debilitating medical conditions, and those patients would then be allowed to possess, purchase, and discreetly cultivate marijuana for personal use. A local senator, Anana Wishart, co-chairs the legalization campaign, and other legislatures have tried for years to pass medical cannabis bills in this legislature, only to be blocked by opposition from leadership. Back 3 years ago, I flew to Nebraska and testified before Nebraska's unicameral Judiciary Committee to allow medical marijuana, but it was blocked by Republican operatives. On Saturday, Moorfield recalled pressing Wagner about the relative dangers of marijuana, alcohol, and other drugs during a Judiciary Committee hearing. A senator tweeted, quote, I asked Sheriff Wagner how many people had died from drug and alcohol overdoses in his career. He said too many to count. He said how many from marijuana? And in fact, the number is 0, not too many to count. The legalization campaign said they would overcome the challenge. They issued a statement saying common sense, compassion, and the law are on our side, end quote. Our next story is from Atlanta, Georgia. The enactment of state-level adult-use marijuana legalization laws is associated with declining rates of lifetime marijuana use by high school students, according to data reported by the United States Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or the CDC. The authors assessed substance abuse patterns among high school students nationwide during the years 2009 to 2019, so about 10 years. They reported a temporary uptick in the prevalence of self-reported lifetime marijuana use by young people from 2009 to 2013, prior to the enactment of state-level adult use legalization laws, followed by a significant decrease in use during the years 2013 to 2019. Beginning with Colorado, nearly a dozen U.S. states began allowing retail marijuana sales to adults between 2014 and 2019. The study's authors called the downward trend in teen marijuana use encouraging. The study's findings are consistent with several others that report marijuana use by young people has not been adversely impacted by adult use legalization policies. This study, Prescription Opioid Misuse and the Use of Alcohol and Other Substances Among High School Students, Youth Behavioral Risk Survey for the United States, is available for the Centers for Disease Control online. A recent study investigating potential treatments for the deadly symptoms of COVID-19 reports that 100% of lab mice who received injections of THC survived the frequently fatal immune system response to the virus. Top researchers at the University of South Carolina said THC may be effective at quelling cytokine storms, a potentially fatal symptom of the coronavirus. The state reports the cytokine storm symptoms, known as acute respiratory distress syndrome, or ARDS, essentially hijack the body's immune system to use it against itself. Coronavirus patients are not most frequently hospitalized due to COVID-19 related ARDS. Prakash Nagarte, the study's co-author, said, quote, "The underlying mechanism is your immune system goes haywire and starts destroying your lungs and all your other organs," end quote. According to the study, researchers were able to trigger ARDS among lab mice, which were then injected with THC. The researchers conducted dozens of such experiments across 3 separate studies and reported that 100% of the mice who were given THC survived the frequently fatal symptoms. There's not currently an FDA-approved treatment for ARDS, and the study's author, Nagardi, said that based on the successful results with mice, he's recommended health officials begin human trials with THC. He warned, however, the research does not suggest that smoking cannabis might be beneficial for COVID-19 patients. Nagardi said, quote, "I just want to make sure our research is not interpreted as marijuana is good for COVID-19. If you start using THC early on, it might worsen the effects because it suppresses the immune system," end quote. Cannabis advocates have called for more research and warned consumers to watch out for overzealous cannabinoid marketeers. The data at this point is preliminary at best. The public needs to be vigilant against predatory marketers prematurely hailing certain cannabis or CBD specific products as supposed COVID treatments or cure-alls. Previously printed studies, or studies that were published before being peer-reviewed, have suggested that certain cannabinoid extracts and terpene solutions could prove effective at mitigating the COVID-19 cytokine storm symptoms. Our next story is out of Italy. The administration of cannabinoids is associated with symptom improvement in patients with autism spectrum disorder and shows promise as potential treatment options, according to a systemic review of relevant studies published in the journal Brain Sciences. Italian investigators reviewed data from 10 published studies and 4 ongoing clinical trials. They reported, quote, "In the present systemic review, we found preliminary evidence showing that cannabinoids might exert beneficial effects on some autism spectrum disorder associated symptoms, such as behavioral problems, hyperactivity, and sleep disorders, with a lower number of metabolic and neurological side effects than prescription medications. Importantly, treatment with cannabinoids allowed patients to reduce the number of prescribed medications and significantly reduce the frequency of seizures in patients with comorbid epilepsy," end quote. The study's authors concluded, quote, The findings were promising as cannabinoids appear to improve some autism spectrum disorder associated symptoms such as problem behaviors, sleep problems, and hyperactivity, with limited cardiac and metabolic side effects. Future studies investigating the acute effects of cannabinoids in people with ASD on neurotransmitter levels could clarify the mechanism of action of cannabinoids. Moreover, the comparison with healthy samples might clarify at least some aspects of the etiopathology of ASD and lay the grounds for potential treatments for core and associated symptoms. End quote. This study, Cannabinoids for People with Autism Spectrum Disorder, a systemic review of published and ongoing studies, appears in this month's edition of Brain Sciences. The use of medical cannabis by those over the age of 60 is positively associated with self-reported improvements in subjects' health-related quality of life, according to data published in the journal Clinical Gerontology. A team of researchers affiliated with the University of Illinois and the University of Iowa surveyed seniors regarding their use of medical cannabis and self-reported outcome changes over a one-year period. Investigators reported a, quote, strong positive association, end quote, between subjects' frequency of cannabis use and self-reported improvements in pain, healthcare utilization, and overall health-related quality of life. Participants failed to report any statistically significant associated between medical cannabis and adverse events. The authors concluded, quote, we identified a strong positive association between higher frequency of cannabis use and improvements to the quality of life and healthcare utilization scores. Our regressive modeling also identified a strong positive relationship between higher frequency of cannabis use and self-reported improvements to pain symptoms. The positive relationship between near daily use and improved reports offer further evidence of the perceived value of medical cannabis as a therapeutic approach for pain management, end quote. These results are hardly surprising. Many seniors likely experimented firsthand with cannabis during their youth and are now returning to it as a potential therapy to mitigate many of the health-related symptoms that come with older age, including chronic pain. Many seniors are well aware of the litany of serious adverse side effects associated with available prescription drugs, like opioids, and they perceive medical cannabis to be a viable alternative. These studies are similar to several others, finding that medical cannabis use by seniors is relatively safe and effective at mitigating pain and improving self-reported quality of life. Data published in the Journal of the American Medical Association Internal Medicine in 2019 reports that rates of marijuana use is climbing among those aged 65 and older. This study, assessing health-related outcomes of medical cannabis use among older persons, is available online. The retail sale of cannabis products is surging in both the United States and Canada. Canadian retailers sold a historic quantity of marijuana and marijuana-related products in the month of June, according to sales data compiled by Statistics Canada. Retailers sold just over $201 million of cannabis in June, the highest monthly total ever reported. June's total marked an 8% increase in sales over the prior monthly record set in May. Adult-use marijuana sales began in Canada in October 2018. Sales trends are similar in much of the United States. In recent months, sales data of adult-use cannabis products in California, Colorado, Illinois, and here in Oregon have reached record highs. According to recent economic analysis of the 24-state legal cannabis market, quote, one unanticipated effect of the COVID-19 pandemic has been the growth acceleration of legal cannabis markets and erosion of the illicit markets in those states which have activated both medical and adult use sales, end quote. The dramatic rise in retail marijuana sales is likely not so much a reflection of increased consumer demand, but of consumers shifting from the illicit market to the above-ground legal marketplace. As these legal markets continue to mature, consumers are going to continue to gravitate toward it and away from the underground marketplace. The next story is from London, England, United Kingdom. The administration of 600 milligrams of oral CBD increases cerebral blood flow in the hippocampus, according to placebo-controlled data published in the Journal of Psychopharmacology. A team of investigators affiliated with London's University College compared the administration of CBD versus placebo in 15 healthy volunteers. The authors of the study reported, quote, "We found evidence that acute CBD causes a significant increase in regional cerebral blood flow to the hippocampus. If replicated, the findings that acute CBD increases cerebral blood flow in the hippocampus may be relevant for hippocampal disorders, such as higher resting hippocampal blood flow is associated with better memory performance." The authors concluded, quote, "These findings may have implications for the potential use of CBD across a range of disorders associated with hippocampal dysfunction, including Alzheimer's disease, post-traumatic stress, and depression," end quote. This study, The Effects of Cannabidiol on Cerebral Blood Flow and its Relationship to Memory, an Arterial Spin Labeling Magnetic Resonance Imaging Study, appears in this month's edition of the Journal of Psychopharmacology. Our last story tonight is from Marseille in France. Hepatitis C infected subjects who use cannabis possess a lower risk of diabetes, according to data published in the journal Viral Hepatitis. A team of French investigators assessed the relationship between cannabis consumption and diabetes prevalence in a nationally representative sample of over 10,000 subjects with hepatitis C. Because chronic hepatitis C virus infection is a high risk factor of insulin resistance, hepatitis infected patients are at a higher risk of developing diabetes than those in the general population. The researchers reported that subjects who acknowledged current marijuana use were approximately half, or 49%, less likely to have diabetes than were non-users. The authors concluded, quote, "In this large cross-sectional study of chronic hepatitis-infected patients, cannabis use was associated with a lower risk of diabetes independent of clinical and socio-behavioral factors. Further studies are needed to elucidate a potential causal link and shed light on cannabis compounds and the mechanisms involved in this relationship," end quote. A previous study published in the Journal of Clinical Infectious Diseases in 2015 reported that cannabis use is positively associated with a lower risk of insulin resistance in hepatitis co-infected patients. Other studies assessing the relationship between marijuana use and diabetes risk in subjects without other pre-existing conditions report that a history of marijuana use is associated with a lower prevalence of both type 2 diabetes as well as the development of certain metabolic risk factors associated with the onset of diabetes. This study, cannabis use is associated with lower risk of diabetes in chronic hepatitis C infected patients. Here's in this month's edition of the Journal of Viral Hepatitis. Well, that's the end of our hemp news segment tonight. We have some more historic clips we're going to run now. Next week we should be back with some more recent interviews. We're going to start trying to do those and throw them in here. So we appreciate you watching our show. Tune in each week and help us restore hemp. Good night.
I knew a man Bojangles and he danced for you. Worn out shoes, silver hair and ragged shirt and baggy pants. That old soft shoe, he jumped so high, really likely a touchdown. Met him in the cell, New Orleans I was, down and out. He looked to me to be the eyes of age. As he spoke right out, talked of life, He laughed, slapped his leg and stared. He said his name Bojangles as he danced a little. Then crossed the cell, grabbed his pants for a better stance, and jumped so high, Then he clicked his heels, let go, laugh, let go, laugh. Shook back his clothes all around. Mr. Bojangles, Mr. Bojangles, he said, name Bojangles as he danced the lick across the cell. He grabbed his pants again for a better stance. Then he clicked his heels. Let go another laugh. Let go another laugh. Shook back his clothes all around. Mr. Bojangles, Mr. Bojangles, Mr. Bojangles, dance, dance. He said he danced on Mr. shows and county fairs throughout the South. He spoke through tears of 50 years how his dog and him just traveled about. His dog up and died, up and died. After 20 years he still grieves. Mr. Bojangles, Mr. Bojangles, Mr. Bojangles, dance, dance. He said I dance now with every chance and honky tonk, for drinks and tips. But most of my time is spent behind these county bars, 'cause I drinks a bit. Then he shook his head, and as he shook his head, I heard someone ask him please. Mr. Bojangles, Mr. Bojangles, Mr. Bojangles, dance, dance, dance.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Maybe we can close in just a little bit more on that. You can see there are 300 marijuana cigarettes in this. This is from the federal government, from the Research Triangle Institute. It was processed. It was grown in Mississippi, in Oxford, Mississippi, at the NIDA Medical Marijuana Research Facility, and then processed in North Carolina into cigarettes. And they send these out. 300 cigarettes is supposed to be a month's supply. And this is one of the tins that they would send the cigarettes out in. It's got nifty little layers of styrofoam and stuff inside here that the cigarettes, you can see the residue is still there from the
How do they send that,
300
Paul?
cigarettes that
Through the
LV
mail?
They send it via the mail.
I thought it was against the law to
It
send
is.
marijuana
It
in the
is.
mail.
The government. Now here is something from Park Davis. It says right down here at the bottom, it's a cannabis medicine. It's for neuralgia from Park Davis.
And
Going-
that's nerve pain, folks.
nerve pain. Going next to it, we get into a whole line of 4 different Eli Lilly products. Here we have fluid extract number, what is that, 96 of cannabis. Yeah, number 96. And then right next to it, we have tincture number 17 of cannabis from Eli Lilly. It says on the front that they're poison, but on the back it says formerly thought to be poisonous, but not considered so now. Down here next to it is a powdered extract of cannabis from Eli Lilly. Now, all of these bottles are at least 80 years old, and in some cases, they're up to 120 years old. Right next to it, this one's exactly 100 years old, and this is another extract from Eli Lilly of Cannabis indica, before they gave them the numbers here. Now, next to it is an unopened bottle of Kurkal for colds and cough, and it's got the label on it is in about 13 different languages. This is from 1892, and it's German and French and Italian and Spanish in addition to English. Right next to it is Linden's Cough Balsam. It also has a multilingual label with the instructions in Finnish and Dutch and other. This one's still here. We can actually take it out and see that it is full. Here it is, Linden's Cough Balsam with real cannabis included. Now, next to it, we have another mentholated cough balsam. Now, you can turn this and you can actually see it has that green look of cannabis. And what is it? It's mentholated cough balsam from Clay Shaw. Clay Shaw, where is that? That's in West Virginia. West Virginia cannabis cough balsam. Next to it, we have Hexatetra. Hexatetra with powdered cannabis sativa. It says right there in the middle of the label, you can see Hexatetra. That's kind of nifty. And then one of the last we have from Great Britain, actually from Liverpool, a cannabis tincture bottle, tincture of cannabis from a pharmacist in Liverpool, England. And then here we have ectoplast corn rings from Cannabis. And I have a collection of about 150 different cannabis medicines, and about 35 of them are different corn removers. And what they do for corns and warts is they'd apply this to the top of the corn and wart, and they'd leave it there for about 3 or 4 days, and then they'd remove it, and then the corn or wart would just scrape away with your fingernail.
Why would you want to tie your girls down like this? Are you into bondage? Well, sort of. The reason is real simple. You get more dope because the light is more even across the top, the buds go out to the sides, and you get more air circulation inside. You just use these real simple little knots here that he can tie and untie real quickly, but he also leaves them real loose around the branch so it doesn't cut any of the circulation of the plant fluid off. And then here along the bottom, he's just punched a little hole right in the side of this container and put a quick little slip knot in here. And actually this is a double half hitch. So what he can do is tie and untie this real quickly, and it makes it real easy to move these branches around. And this plant, well, it's a Buddhist Sister G13 haze cross. So you've got really heavy, dense foliage, and by spreading it out like this, it's going to grow more dope. Look at this branch here. If this branch was straight up, it wouldn't have as much sun. Now, if we look at this tall plant over here, it's really tied down. This is mainly, well, it's all sativa. It's a cross, a Malawi, Colombian, Thai, and Jamaican cross. So that's sativa all the way. That's why the plant's so much taller. But notice he's pulled the branches down quite a bit more than on the dominantly, or the heavy indica plant here. And it's really made quite a difference, because otherwise this plant would be another 2 feet tall, and in most locations that's not a good thing. And if you're growing indoors, it's incredibly good to tie them down like this, because you keep an even profile and the light is able to penetrate inside this plant here. And that's why I like to tie things down. Well, we've got to be just a little bit quiet in this garden because there's neighbors on all sides. So we'll just play it real slow and quiet. In here, we've got another 4 plants. It's quite interesting. What the grower's done is he's taken this fence and stuck it around these posts, picked it up from the bottom, slid it up here, and done that here, and at the end, and as well on the other side. Some places it didn't fit, so he had to make it longer, and he had to make a knot. But what this gives him is a trellis that he can slide up and down, and it's real convenient when you do this, and it's very, very simple. Much better than putting a trellis with hooks, because you can't move it once the hooks or eye bolts are in place. Now also what he's done is, once the plants get taller, he just simply puts them up, puts the posts up on blocks. We're up about 4 or 5 inches here. He'll put it up another 4 or 5 inches. By the time he harvests, it'll probably be up to about here. And now, since we're down here, let's take a look at these pots. These are 15, 18 gallon pots, it looks like. They're full of soil. They get watered heavily every day. Notice that he's taken this monofilament line and stretched around here to contain the buds. Because one of the problems he's having already is the buds are so big that they're falling over. And they've got another 4 to 5 weeks before harvest. Now here's what they do with some of the buds. They put them on these little yo-yos like this, because otherwise, as you can see, this bud would be all the way down there. So he lets it come up, or he uses this yo-yo, keeps it totally up, out of the way, growing towards the sunlight. Holy smokes! No, where am I? God. Whoa. I must have fallen asleep out here or something. I don't know, man. We were drinking all that good wine from Navarra, and that's all we remember. Whoa, what the hell? Gee, oh, I remember, now I remember. Estamos en mi, okay, we're in my friend Ernesto's garden. I know these plants. How you doing, ladies? Yeah. Well, let's smoke one. Ernesto, vamos a fumar una peta. Vamos, yeah. Oh, I mean, we're gonna smoke a joint, and then I'll tell you about my friends here. I can't believe this guy. He's had the same genetics for 9 years. He's been making clones of clones of clones of the same plant for 9 years. That is, he started with one plant, now he's got different ones, but he'll make a clone, keep it for a year, take clones of that, keep it for a year, maybe 2, and this is the 9th year here. So I'm pretty impressed with the integrity of the genetics. It just keeps going. These are super skunks over here. Nice big plants, big. And notice the more growing medium they're in, the bigger they grow. These plants have less growing medium. They're not nearly as big. He's growing in this cocoa peat. And originally, the cocoa comes in a brick, about 1 kilo, 2 pounds, 2.5 pounds, like that. They take the brick, put it in a bucket of water. It expands to about 9 times the original size. So one brick will, gosh, fill up a bucket like that as soon as it's wet. Then after that, they just put it in the bucket, and that's the growing medium. It's a hydroponic growing medium because it doesn't react with anything. Now, the interesting part about this cocoa is it was used last year. They put canazyme in it to eat up all the roots and everything that you can still see in this little bit of cocoa. Once the roots are gone, they use it again. Since he's using the cocoa 2 years in a row, he doesn't have to schlep the stuff down and buy new cocoa and bring it back. So it really saves him a lot of work, and he doesn't have to answer any questions to his neighbors either. Well, one of the advantages of cocoa is it holds a heck of a lot of water. That means you can water it and leave your plants for a day or two, even if they get full sun or lots of wind. But the fact that it holds a lot of water could also work against you. Some people don't like to use it because they say it stays just too wet for their situation. In this situation, it works great because he's got full sun almost all day, or for about 10 hours a day, And the other thing is, he just gets a lot of wind here. For example, you can see the shade cloth right here moving back and forth. He gets wind all day and all night. That really dries plants out. So for his situation, cocoa's great. But for example, if you lived in a place where you really didn't get much wind at all and not a lot of sunlight, this could very well stay too wet for you. Also, another thing I like really well about this shade cloth is that it lets some air through, but not all of the air through. So it really cuts down on the desiccation level of the plants. They just don't dry out as fast. And if this was a solid wall, what would happen is the air would spin over the top and would actually get a lot more wind down in here and shake the plants up even more. You can tell they get some wind, but not tons, because the stems are not totally stiff and full of cellulite. No, you can tell cellulose, not cellulite. One of the problems he's had is rain. Rain is really heavy when the water sits on the plants and whatnot, and it pushes them over. So he's had to tie his plants back up. This is good. He runs the string around the branch like this, so it's really loose there. He doesn't tie it tight at all, and that's really important, because if he tied it too tight, the stem continues to grow, and it actually grows right into this string here, and what happens is the circulations of fluids get cut off. So you want to always make a loose knot or something that's going to stretch a little bit. My friend Ernesto pretty much wears the same clothes every day, so my best guess is he's using this clothes rack to dry his buds. And you just fold it out and you hang your buds right along here. Great. You can hang them anywhere, inside or outside, and then to darken it, all you do is throw a blanket or a sheet, anything over it, so the buds will stay nice and dark and don't decompose. And then you can put a fan underneath, or just leave the blanket or a sheet up off the floor a little bit, and there's great air circulation. These things are great. Hey, Green Giant, thanks so much for the wake-up call. You know, I'll tell you, after spending a little bit of time with these lucky ladies here, I feel a lot better. But you know, I think I'd feel a little better even yet if I had a joint. I'm gonna smoke one now. Oye, Ernesto, ¿hacemos una peta? Ya vamos, ya, listos. When I first started growing dope, the big thing was sin semilla. Sin semilla is Spanish for without seeds. And the way you grow a sin semilla plant is you start with a female plant, and you gotta keep her a virgin. This little girl right here, hate to say it, but she's no longer a virgin. As you can see, some rogue pollen found its way into this little girl's pistils, and well, now she's in trouble. You can see there's a couple of seeds formed down here. There's some male pollen going around, and the seeds formed, but just a few of them early on. All the plants on this terrace are females, but the pollen that created these seeds came from somewhere out there. Somebody within a half a mile of this garden here had male plants, and that's why these plants here got seeded. So there's really little you can do about it other than keep your plants contained, grow them earlier in the year, or grow them later in the year. As a grower, we've got to find ways to fight this rogue pollen. But it's nice to know that love does find a way.
Okay.
Well, if you wonder what that is, that's one of the overflyers, or one of these guys that could be out looking for this greenhouse. If the helicopter comes from the local RCMP, they'll sit above this greenhouse about 30, maybe 20 feet. The downdraft from the blades of the helicopter will just blow this greenhouse apart, spread the plants, and wreak general havoc. Once they've done that, they've pretty much done their job. They go out and look for another one. But if they can't blow it apart with just the force of the rotors on the helicopter. They've got a great big hunk of concrete with a big iron hook in it. Well, they just drag this thing around through the air, and anything that they can't blow apart, they just stomp on it with this great big piece of concrete. Very effective, and it requires no warrants. Now remember, this war on drugs, it's a war against you and me. So all we can do to fight it is arm ourselves with knowledge. Spider-Man could save the world, but spider mites could eat your garden. Does having spider mites mean that your whole garden is a loss? Well, no, because when the plants are harvested, all the spider mites leave. And this is what you do. You have a cord like this that you hang your buds from, and on each end you put a little bit of tanglefoot. That's this sticky stuff that the bugs can't cross, or they won't cross it. Put a little bit right here and right here with your buds in between. What happens is the spider mites come up the bud, walk out to the end, find that they can't cross this tanglefoot, and they all congregate here and here. So you can tell exactly how many spider mites were on your plants, and that's the easiest way to get rid of them after you've harvested. Let's look at a few of these other plants that have been abused a bit. These plants, the timer went off and nobody checked them for 5 days. So they suffered light stress, as in no light. And if we look at the tops, we'll see what happened is they were trying to produce chlorophyll and trying to assimilate the nitrogen, but without the light, they couldn't do it. So all of this new growth up here burned. This is something new. I'd never seen a plant that not have light for 5 days. Well, it sure isn't very good for them. And it's going to take these plants at least 2 weeks to recover from this problem. They just brought them in 2 days ago. But like I say, these will make it. Give them another few days here, start them to flower, and then they'll take them outside, and this plant will be buried about this deep. It'll bury it all the way this deep. The ground level will come up to here. And what happens when you do that is that all of this stem here, this subterranean stem, will grow roots. It'll take it about a month, but it'll grow roots. And once you plant it that deep, there's very little need for watering it much, because the main mass of roots are down deep enough and they can pull in all kinds of water. So that's a real good trick for outdoor growing when you move your plants outdoors. Well, what they're going to do is they're going to take these plants, transplant them out in the forest. And the reason they left them to be so tall with so much internodal length is so that the plants would be able to fend for themselves and get sun, because the underbrush is very, very dense and it comes up to about 3 feet or a meter, right? So just by doing that, these plants will have a better chance. As well, they need to toughen up. This plant's pretty tough and strong because it's so old. Well, I'll tell you, there's a hell of a lot of slugs out there on the bush and a lot of different insects, fungus, different things like that can attack this plant. And if it's older and stronger, the chances of survival are much greater. You know, I got a letter the other day from this guy, and he says, Jorge, I read all your books, I read your column in High Times, I've got your first DVD, and I want to grow in my closet. But I went there and looked, and it's full of clothes. So I said to him, listen, what you do is you go down to the grow store and buy a closet. From the time you buy this, bring it in your house and open the first box until this point right here, when everything's put together, is simply 2 hours. And it takes just a little bit less time to knock it all down and box it back up. If we look at the level of these plants right now, it's a pretty good, pretty even level. When they finish out, they're going to finish out right about here. And it's going to be green everywhere. So notice there's enough space in between the plants for some extra growth. You really want to flower your plants when they're nice and small like this. Even in a small garden like this, 4 by 4 feet with 600 watts, you can easily grow a pound of nice buds like this. Some people grow cannabis for the buds. Other people grow cannabis for the money. But here, this grower's growing medicine. We've been invited into this medical garden by a grower who's confined to a wheelchair. Notice that there's plenty of space to get in here in a wheelchair. He's got access to his entire bottom shelf here. Real quick and easy, simple stuff. He can touch everything right here, maintain it, play with these lights, grab anything over here and mix things back over here. I'm gonna have to stand up here. Okay, he can mix anything he wants right here in the container. He's got a hose that runs in here. He's got another container here that he can pour things back and forth and mix with. And I thought this was really ingenious. He's got a watering bucket with an extra tube hooked onto it. So he can reach from a wheelchair. Imagine you're here. You can reach back here and water this plant here or water this plant here, all from the confines of a wheelchair. You know, it's really a tragic shame that so many governments do not recognize cannabis as medicine. But growers like this have my heartfelt admiration because they take matters into their own hands and grow their own medicine. The first thing I noticed when we came into this room is that it was spotless. There's no dirt anywhere. This is important for any grow room, but when you're growing medicinal cannabis, it's very, very important. Well, let's see how this room works. Here, we've got the intake air. Comes in through this wall, down around the corner, and the air is expelled down here, right behind the heater. Excellent way to bring it in, low into the room and underneath the plants so it doesn't bother them. Okay, now the air that's taken out of the room goes through this filter, comes up across the ceiling, and it's just vented right into the flowering room. Now, here he's got his recently taken cuttings, and notice everything is labeled. New York Diesel here, Cincy Star. Well, not only is this a medical garden, it's also an organic garden. The two should go hand in hand because organics is the best way to grow medicinal cannabis. It's clean and safe. Well, here we are in the same medical garden, but we're in the flowering room. Notice that there's plenty of space everywhere to get in and out and have excellent access to all of the plants. And the grower makes sure that the plants don't get too big. This garden is designed for complete wheelchair access. For example, look at these platforms that the plants are sitting on. They've all got wheels. That means it's really easy to roll them around and have access to all of the plants quickly and easily with very little effort. Now, this plant is stationary because it gets light from both sides. When he moves these plants to this light, he moves the new clones in the other room right here. He says he moves about 6 to 8 of them in every 15 days. That means that every 15 days he will also harvest 6 to 8 plants. Not bad. You ever look in your closet and feel like you have nothing to wear? Well, that's the problem with this closet. But he's got something to smoke. Now, I really like the way that he's done this. He hangs each one of his plants, nice small little plants, on a hanger here. And notice he takes the tag off of it and hangs it right over the hanger. Very simple, very quick, and easy. And then we've got the thermometer and the hygrometer down here. 56% humidity, 24 degrees Celsius, which is about 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Once these buds are dried from anywhere from 5 days to 14 days, they're just snipped off the branches and moved right down here and put in these jars to start the curing process. I can tell you right now, this is good medicine. What these ingenious growers have done is wrapped the 12-inch ducting, flexible ducting, with a sleeping bag. And they've used a bungee cord here to secure everything. What in the heck are they doing? Why do they do this? Well, they do it to cut down vibration. Okay, vibration means noise, and what we want to do is we want to shunt all the vibration we can into something else, such as a padded object like this sleeping bag, to lessen the noise. So this is much quieter because it's got the sleeping bag around it. Now they also sell
She don't lie and she don't cheat. That's the word out there. Son, have a seat. Better treat her right. There won't even be a fight. 'Cause she's a girl living in a cruel world. She's got the bootsy blues. She owns a cat house, this ain't no frat house, and she works so hard every day. Been through hell, and she still lives to tell. Toss the house and catch the mouse, and she's got the bootsy blues. Boop boop bop bop beat up boop bop what up bop a bop ba da boop bop ba da bop bop ba doo ba da 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 bop boop bop ba dee da 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 bop bop ba da bop a bop bop ba da bop bop boop a boop bop beat boop bop ba da bop. See, nobody's going to put her on a shelf. She'll simply reinvent herself. Better treat her right. There won't even be a fight. 'Cause she's above your mediocre love, and she's got the bootsy blues. 'Cause she's above your mediocre love, and she's got the bootsy blues. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming on and singing a song. I want to thank you viewers again. We'll be back next Friday night, and for Friday nights into the foreseeable future. So stay tuned and help us restore him. Good night. Restore him. We keep trying.